All right, well, thank you, Ram. Everyone, good morning. Welcome. Everyone online, welcome. My name is Jeff. If you're here, it's because you're here to hear me talk about building a modern quality program from the ground up. Before I start, usually when I give this talk, people want to know, like, why are we here listening to you? What's your background, right? So right now, I'm a senior engineering manager at a company called Iterable. And I got my start in San Diego. I went to UCSD. I was a CS major. I started off as a C++ developer, but kind of came out during the recession. So I ended up in QA. And that's kind of how I started. Ron mentioned, I've been in industries such as medical device, web security, a lot of SaaS companies. I've been at companies where there are like 75 people total, all the way up to Series D, Series E to public companies. I really see kind of this talk coming from two areas, right? One is called learning and one's called building, right? I got a lot of my learnings from, working my way in different kind of startups, right? The two that I see where I got a lot from about is, here in Skylight Healthcare was a medical device company and there were only two QA. And it's this company where I was there for 5 years where I really started to kind of had to do everything, right? We were the hardware testers, we were the software testers, automation, manual, we had to go in the field. I also really enjoyed my time at iLovation, which is actually a small startup. It used to be across the river, Big Pink in Portland. It's interesting because it was a very disparate group of technologies, right? We had QA that did Ruby, we had QA that did Python, front end, back end APIs. So being part of that group really got me the ability to see a lot of different stacks. Finally, the second portion of what I see is called building. And this is my experience building QA programs. So I was recruited to an SF company called Optimizely, which is an A/B testing platform. And I was brought there because they were a Series C company going to D, doing very well, making a lot of money, but the product had a lot of quality issues. And finally, the head of the engineering was like, hey, I need someone to come in here to kind of help me understand why we're failing. So at Optimizely, I built the QA program from 0 to 6 plus engineers. And very similarly at Iterable, another company that came in at Series C, we're now Series E, very similar. The head of engineering came to me and was like, we have a problem. I cannot figure out why our quality is bad, right? So how can we fix this? So I was brought there. At 2 years, I built the org to 6 plus engineers and also built something called the engineering operations, which has 2 plus TPMs. I know there's piano music. I don't know why. So I apologize. I have no idea what's going on, but yeah. So, I'll do my best. Let me know if you can't hear me. So let's kind of move on. So what is this talk about, right? This talk really is about, I want to revisit how QA programs have changed for startups, right? And what is causing this change? 2, I want to talk about why do companies without QA programs suddenly want, a QA program? And what do I mean by this? If you go online and you see job listings, right? More and more you'll see like, we're hiring a QA manager, we're hiring a QA lead, we're hiring our first QA automation engineer, right? And all of these things, they're looking for the first person to build that program for us, the first person to introduce quality program. What's that change? Why are we seeing so many more of these jobs? And lastly, I'm going to talk through my experience in what it takes to build what I call a modern QA program. So let's start from the beginning. When I started off in QA, a decade and a half ago, right? This is kind of what QA was, right? Here's the developer SDLC, and QA kind of sits on the side, right? So when developers doing requirement analysis, we kind of build a test plan, right? When they're doing system design, we're building our test cases. When they're doing development, maybe we'll do automation, right? We'll start building it in parallel. They kind of toss it over that proverbial wall, and here we execute our test. After we finished X amount of tests, we feel confident. What happens? We release, right? So they're kind of supporting the release. We're making sure it goes. And then maintenance, right? Oh yeah, there's defects. Can we reproduce it? How do we make sure it's good? This is like very much the traditional QA model of what, how QA used to be, right? Now, what's changed, right? What has happened? So what I've seen the big difference is the startups, a lot of startups are starting, right? A lot of small startups. In the last decade, you'll see the growth of how many of these like small seed startups kind of exploded exponentially. And these small startups don't just grow, right? They scale, right? Example, DoorDash, right? Started off in Stanford as like a 2-man operation, manning the phone, bringing food to Stanford students. And now they're, everyone knows what DoorDash is. It's a global operation, right? But they scaled. And a lot of these small startups, when they started, don't have QA. And why, right? In fact, when Optimizely first started, I actually knew the founders, and I joked with him once. I was like, Dan, do you ever want to hire a QA guy? He's like, we would never hire a QA. Fast forward 8 years, he hired me, right? So why? Well, you have to understand the thing about startups is, velocity, right? When you have a small startup, speed is king. They're rushing to get things to market, and they don't have the bandwidth to necessarily slow down to do QA, right? The risk is lower. They're not even sure what they're selling sometimes, right? They're still trying to adjust to market. And a lot of times the developers deploy straight from their computer. So what are you really testing? Is the risk that significant, right? Why do they need to slow down? 3 is tooling, right? You hear the modern DevOps stresses the importance of shift left, shift right, right? Suddenly, as companies scale, they get to like 75 developers, the head of engineering is like, well, my engineer should test. They write tons of unit tests. Why do I need QA? And this brings the problem of job fit, right? Why do you need QA, right? What is the role of QA? Looking at this model, right? And this is one of the conversations I have a lot with CTOs, right? They tell you things like, hey, we can shift left, all this unit testing, we can constantly, validate. It's faster. We don't need this slow end-to-end regression. We don't need these processes. We don't need someone to sit there and let us know it's safe. We can ship faster. And on the other side, we're seeing the advent of a lot more tools, right? Like feature flagging, A/B testing, predictive, ops insight. Hey, I know when something goes bad, my infrastructure is so strong, I can flip a switch, it's gone. Let my customers tell me something's bad, and I'll make it go away, right? So with all these things, the question is, do we need a traditional QA engineer, right? And we look at it, a lot of companies, the answer is no, right? Yahoo eliminated all their QA engineers. Salesforce got rid of their QA engineers, right? Well, interestingly enough, what we're discovering now with this shift is at the end of the day, you can have an engineering organization that's bought into shift left, and maybe they're doing some great things in shift right, but they still have high level of incidents or shoddy feature releases. And what does this mean? Unhappy customers. And when you have unhappy customers, what happens? You lose business, they churn. And this is because there's a lot of noise around techniques or processes that are supposed to help you deliver features better, but by themselves, do they really work? And what does this mean? So in the last 5-6 years, building 2 QA programs, talking to head of engineering, consulting, et cetera, right? One of the conversations I always have with my engineering leadership is, okay, well, what are you doing to ensure quality? And how does this translate to happy customers, right? And they'll tell me things like, we don't have any, we're good. We don't file defects. But does no defects really mean that your quality is good? I love it. Oh yeah, our developers built 700 Cypress tests. We're good. What are you testing? What does that even mean? What is 700 actually equivalent to, right? The best is, oh yeah, my CMO says our NPS is 95, we're good. But how many times do you have a customer who's happy, tomorrow churns, goes red? This new one is development velocity. Hey, move fast, break things, right? That's what Facebook said. But Facebook even changed it, right? It's no longer move fast, break things. What is it now, right? Move fast with stable infra. The other one is, hey, yeah, we're good, 90% code coverage. My developers write unit tests. Our quality should move fast with stable infra. Unit testing coverage. Hey, 90%, everyone writes unit testing. We're good, right? But once again, what are you testing? How does that translate to happy customers? Lastly, this is the new one I love, right? Hey, yeah, we A/B test everything. We're good. Feature flags rule. When it crashes so hard. Because once again, how are you managing your feature flags? What are you actually delivering to your customers? Blanketly saying that I can turn on or off something does not equate good. And what this really tells me, right, is that companies are struggling to understand how to deliver features with quality that delight their customers, right? Engineering orgs are trying to serve a customer base, and if they're doing well, they'll scale, those customers are going to mature. They're going to go enterprise. And those Enterprise customers have matured expectations and have higher standards. And if I'm the head of engineering, I need to be able to quantify what quality satisfaction means for those customers in terms of engineering output. And I need someone to help me build and lead the processes, programs, and technical solutions to enable my engineering team to align on these business priorities of customer satisfaction. So I pulled this quote from the World Quality Report in 2019, 2020, right? And this is, this organization basically trends all the quality indicators from all the different industries. And this is the top line in the very first opening, right? The main strategic challenge QA teams are facing in agile and DevOps adoption is operational and business priorities, now more than ever, right? And basically what it's saying is we need to come up with a new way of working, right? We need to be able to tie these things together. And this new way of working is what I term the modern quality program. So you are the first leader to come in here to build a modern quality program. What are the 4 key roles I consider you need to be able to master to be successful? Now, great first portion, Vernon, awesome. He brought up 3 things, right? He said people, technology, business, right? I hate to break it to you. If you want to build your program, guess what? You need to have all 3, right? You need to, people-wise, you need to be able to run the quality program, right? This is the people portion. Can you implement the quality SDLC program, driving the engineering org towards quality North Star? Technology, right? You need to be a technical architect, right? You have to be the visionary of the technical roadmap of tools, frameworks, and QA ops needed for engineering to move with high velocity. Business-wise, what is the quality operations, right? How do you identify what KPI metrics represent quality and review if the organization is achieving its goals? Now I said 3, I lied, there's 1 more, right? You gotta remember, if you are starting a program, you are an engineering leader and you need to act like that, right? You need to be able to work cross-functionally across partner organizations to champion the customer experience. And you need to manage your resources to accomplish this mission. So let's dive in, right? First one I mentioned is quality program manager, right? So what do you need to be a quality program manager? I kind of break it down into a few things. One is your program vision. What quality program and process does my company need now, and what will it need in the future? Hey, you just got the job, right? What should you be building? Very first thing I always say is vision means what? What's your charter? Why are you doing this, right? Example for Iterable is all about delivering joy to its customers. So our charter for my quality engineering org at Iterable is to ensure the engineering team is enabled to deliver joyful experiences for every organization in the world. That means that anything we do must fulfill that charter. It doesn't mean to test. It doesn't mean to write automation. It means that that's my goal. I will do anything possible to achieve that outcome. That is my vision, right? And then once you have a vision, you can stack rank the things that you need to accomplish that, right? What are the critical areas that you see are damaging the ability for your engineering org to fulfill your promise of delivering that outcome, joyful experiences, right? And that way you can determine, hey, you get hired, what should you really be doing? Is it a program you need to build? Is it a process you need to improve? Or is it technical automation you need to build? And finally, how are you going to go about achieving this vision, right? You've established your roadmap, which is your stack rank, right? How do you define those milestones? How do you communicate them out? And how do you know if you're hitting them or not? That is program vision, right? Because you know where you're going, you know how you're going to get there, and you know what it takes to succeed. 2, very people-wise, right? Quality coaching, right? Implementing the quality SDLC justify the return of investment in the program. Here's the thing I've seen, which threw me off, was I was in QA for about 15 years. And all the developers I knew, we had a cadence, right? They did something, I did something, high five, let's move forward. Most startups that don't have QA have no concept of what a test plan should look like. Their test plans I've seen is 2 sentences. We have 17 unit tests and we wrote something in Selenium. Done. That's their test plan. They don't know, right? Their test cases could be like, oh, I have a 4-year task, right? It is your job as a quality coach, to teach them, what is a test plan? Why do you have it? What is a test case? Should you have a set criteria? Does your organization need a definition of done? What is a launch checklist, right? You'd be surprised, so many teams, they don't have any of this stuff, right? So what is the SDLC? Oops, one more. The other thing about quality coaching I forgot to mention is thought leadership, right? Are the quality processes being implemented actually generating ROI? There is tons of like best practices that been established for many years. The truth is you cannot implement all of them because they may not all work. So thought leadership in quality coaching means, what does my organization need? How do I build it for them? And how do I implement it? It may not be perfect, but it's better than not having anything, right? A good example is, if I was to come to a company, I'd be like, okay, you cannot release unless you have XYZ in terms of test plans and this and that, and it's going to kill your velocity by, X amount. I might as well write my own like pink slip. I'm fired, right? There's no way they're going to let you do it. You need to be able to justify the ROI and get you there. Now, the third one I have here is customer advocacy, right? This one is how do we ensure that customer experience is baked into how we build features? And this one almost is like, wait, why is it my job to be the customer advocate, right? But once again, you need to get out of this mindset of I'm a tester. Instead, you should be thinking, how do I guarantee the quality of our program? And what that means is you got to get out of this mindset of your job is to make sure, did I build it right? Right? Did I build it right? Does this product work right? Is also, did I build the right product? Because if that's wrong, what are you doing? And one of the ways I see this as important is customer advocacy, right? So some examples, really quick. We do something called bug bash, right? Which is like some manual testing. But we don't just invite developers. We make sure that, solution architects, AEs, customer service comes in, because they're the ones supporting our customers. So when they test, they can immediately tell us, no one's going to use it this way. It's dumb. I immediately know I'm going to get a ticket for this. When we do acceptance criteria, it's not just from product and design and engineering. We also submit those for review to CS, the GTM, because those are the people that are going to be selling this. So they can tell us right away, dude, this is not going to fly, right? Being the quality program manager is being involved in that business to drive these outcomes. And you have to be thinking outside of the traditional SDLC. All right, next one, technical architect. Now, the technical architect, I see it as two things, right? It's the technical leadership side and the automation mentorship side. So what does this mean? The technical leadership side is, what should the best practices be here and how do we execute them? This could be like, how are we doing QA ops? What does my CI/CD look like, right? What is our strategy in shifting left, right? Like, does that make sense? How do we maybe shift right? Like, should we be using feature flags? How do we govern those, right? Build versus buy. This one actually I think is huge because, you're going to hear tons of vendors always say, hey, we'll solve it for you. Low code, we'll do this for you. Is that right? Is that the right tool for you? Maybe, maybe not. On the other hand, if you have a staff engineer saying, hey, I can write that framework for you, no problem. I'm like, there's a lot of things that I want to ask. Like, is it sustainable, right? If you quit, is the whole thing going to go down? How flaky is it, right? So technical leadership is like, are we doing the right thing technically, right? Does this make sense, right? Do we want to run 1,000 tests and it takes 9 hours to deploy? Is that healthy, right? So these are the questions that you need to be in those meetings to answer. Now, on the automation mentorship side is building the program to up-level my engineers to write good automation. Contrary to popular belief, generally speaking, if you are the first QA engineer, if you're spending a lot of time coding, you're probably not driving any of the other things that you need to do, right? When I first built the program, there were a few times where I was like in code, writing some libraries, but eventually, you'll kind of either partner with automation engineers, you hire them, or you'll partner with developers to build it, right? Instead, the value you get oftentimes isn't coding, but is mentoring people to code, right? This could be, PR reviewing people's checking code, right? So at our company, developers write Cypress, we don't. But we do PR review it, and we'll say things like, you're going to break the pipeline. That's going to cause X amount of flaky tests. I can already tell you that's wrong, right? Or you don't write your own library, reuse this library, right? Here's a documentation for it. It could be like, how do you build coaching in your company? So at our company, we use something called a testing guild, right? So our staff engineers come in once a month, we talk about topics, they get a sprint cycle to work on these, and they bring the best practices to junior engineers. We have things like quality champions in our company where we highlight and reward engineers who do great quality work, right? This buy-in from leadership means that testing is not just QA, but it's the whole company-wide, but QA is leading that charge in terms of the automation. The third one is quality operations. Quality operations involves identifying the indicators that we want to monitor and measure to determine our system quality and customer satisfaction, right? This is the business, right? Does the stuff we're doing actually going to help us make money, right? And this allows us to utilize data-driven hypotheses on what adjustments we should make to our quality program or technical initiatives to achieve better outcomes, right? So quality operations runs in a cycle, right? We're going to constantly run in this cycle. And what is the cycle? Well, the first one is data collection, right? What indicators do we want to monitor to determine our system quality and customer satisfaction, right? And how do we collect this data? So what does it mean, in our opinion, that we can check to see our system's good, and we're doing good, we're releasing good, right? Or bad, right? Once we know this data, what do? We want to drive visibility, right? So how do we share out this data to right parties, and do they understand what it means, right? So if I'm using some indicator like amount of 7-1s, high severity tickets, right? And I see one team is really bad, right? How do I drive visibility that the team understands they're making those mistakes, right? And that they understand what the value is. It's not like calling them out, but it's like, hey, we know where the problem is. We can start to identify the root cause. Now, the third thing is implementation. Once you understand the data, the baseline, what's going on, why is it bad, right? You want to drive discussion on, hey, what can we do to improve it, right? Maybe, hey, let's slow down. Maybe we need a freeze for this team because there's too much technical debt, right? Maybe this team releases too fast, they don't have the right testing, right? Let's, as a group, call it out, understand what, and implement, right? Drive that change. 4, obviously, is governance. Guess what? You can say it, will they do it, right? So part of building a quality model program, being that quality leader, is putting your foot down and driving the governance, right? You need to create and review the systems that will hold stakeholders accountable for change, right? Most of the time, I leverage my boss, the head of engineering, give him a nice big dashboard, red letter, red, green, right? You bad, you red, you good, you green, right? But every week during our leadership meetings, I show them the dashboard, right? And if if your team is out of cycle, you're not doing it right, you're red, and it's very clear. Suddenly, the governance is on that, right? The push, right? Performance. Why isn't your team doing well? Lastly is what I call reflection and analytics, right? Understand if your initiatives actually made a difference, and then how do you change, right? Sometimes we're wrong. Maybe adding more tests didn't do anything, but you should be able to see, hey, we added more tests, we're still getting Y more incidents, didn't work. Fine, adjust it, go back, collect the data, start again. Create that virtuous cycle, right? And that is how you adjust your program to target what you should be doing. Now, I talked a lot about data. What are some data that I love? What are some KPI metrics that just thrill me, right? So the first one I like is normalized bug ratio, right? This number of incoming customer reported bugs versus number of outgoing pull requests. I like this because there are times when you have like no bugs, but you didn't ship code. Everyone's on vacation. Does that mean you're good? Your system's healthy? And there are times when we have a lot of bugs, but everyone's cramming. We ship so much value. So that's fine, right? I don't expect codeless days. I actually think some bugs are good. It means that we're shipping. We're going to make money. You don't ship, you're in trouble. 2, I like to look at my high severity bugs. These are the ones that keep me up at night, right? I like to see the amount of high, and I like to see their SLO, SLA, right? Like time to close, time to remediate. This gives me a good indicator of technical debt, right? What's wrong with my system? Lastly, none of this matters if you don't know your business, right? And people kind of hate on this one, but what is your NPS score or any data that shows customer usage rates or happiness index, right? People say, oh, customers, like you gave them like credits, so they're happy, right? But engineers tend to be like ostriches when it comes to these numbers because they're like, it doesn't matter to me. Why do I care? But the truth is, the work that they're doing, customers need to be happy, so they'll renew, they'll buy. And if you don't understand the sentiment of why, then you're just going to keep building the same way, right? So being able to drive this value back to your engineering org so they can understand it and see it allows you to kind of, if you want to make initiative change, to be able to, like see why, right? Like, hey, we're actually not doing good. We have to change. We're going to lose customers if we don't do this. Sorry, my iPad just turned off, so cool. Now, the second set of quality metrics I love, these are non-traditional QA metrics, right? The four that I have here are the DORA metrics. And I think this is super important because a lot of times I've seen QA leaders, like they're so focused on the QA metrics, bugs, like time to close, amount of leakage. They don't see what the head of engineering sees. And if I'm the head of engineering, right, and I'm talking to my board members, every quarter I talk to my board members, do you think the CTO is going to say, oh yeah, we only had X amount of leakage or bugs or 5 severity ones? The board's going to be like, what does that even mean? I have 17 other companies I'm on board for. What is 6 severity ones versus 9 severity ones versus 5 wingdings, 4 bats? No one knows. These metrics, on the other hand, by DORA, I think it's a Google research, I forgot. They allow you to benchmark how healthy your engineering org is across every single, like a lot of companies, right, from all kinds of industries, right? And they've defined it as elite, high, medium, low. And for me as a QE leader, right, I like to look at this and say, okay, how's my company doing against other companies? And I can give this story to my boss so he knows, right? If we're really bad, that's something is not just quality, it's the whole organization. The head of engineering needs to know, right? So the two things that I like to look at, change failure rate, obviously, right? Change failure rate is the deployment frequency versus the times you have to roll back incident, right? And that tells me, overall health, how we're doing, right? And that's not just like bugs, it's like, like system. And the other one is mean time to restore service, right? You have a bug, something went down, how fast can you get your customers happy? And that's super important because that's not just testing, right? Did you plan quality well? Did you plan your product well? Part of quality is the release. Did you strategize well, right? An example at Optimizely is we pushed every release front end to be behind a feature flag because any point, if something goes bad, you can flip that feature flag back and you're good in 15 minutes. You don't have to roll another deploy out. So no matter how crappy our pipeline was, that flag gave us a 15-minute MTTR. We dropped our average MTTR to 15 minutes. And that resounded highly with our customers, and they were happy because, hey, they write in, and in 15 minutes, they're back. That's quality, right? That's not testing, that's quality. All right, the last one I bring up is engineering leader. So you gotta remember, right? This role, you're the first one, you're a leader, right? And there's things that you need to think about as the first leader for this org, right? One, I have to bring up is involve security early and often. I don't know how many of you are actually in small startups. The security program at small startups is atrocious. It's really bad, right? They maybe have one guy who's like the security engineer and they haven't thought through it, right? It's terrifying. Like even at my company, we just hit Series E like a few months ago. We just hired a CISO, like, oh my God, like, make sure you build your program with security in mind, right? Everything you do, like, oh, I'm gonna build a test plan. We need to do test plans. Also, what's the security plan in that test plan, right? Because the truth is, as the world improves connectivity, modern bad actors have become more savvy in penetrating applications, right? This creates a huge business requirement for greater security and resilience, and that requires QA to involve security. So involve security early and often. 2, utilize soft power. Like I cannot stress this enough. If you are the first quality leader in your company, you probably won't have a lot of resources. So you need to be able to, if you drive your policies, you drive your programs, right? You need to utilize soft power. You need other EMs, you need other staff engineers, you need other, architects to buy into what you're doing to get things happening. Most likely it's not the stick, it's the, what is it, the honey, right? That's the way to get it. Swiss Army knife job roles. For both programs I've built, I've also been the Jira admin. I've been a technical program manager. I've been the product manager for internal tools. I've been a DevX champion, right? You got to be comfortable knowing that, you're stepping outside of just testing. You're stepping into any role necessary to drive the outcome you want, right? Don't be afraid of that. Most often, small startups it's like, I remember working at CareFusion. It's a huge company, and it was very much like regimented, like this is someone's role, stay in your lane. But when you hit the small startup, it's not like that, or even growing startups, right? It's like they need people to step up, to take the initiatives. You cannot be afraid to take it, right? If you don't step up and take it, no one will do it. So I call this Swiss Army knife role jobs, because if you see something that needs to be done, even if it's not your job role, if it's not going to get you paid more, take it on, because it will help build the infrastructure you need to get what you need later on. Thoughtful team building. If you do all this, you will get that conversation with your boss. Hey, you're doing too much. Let me hire a few people for you. Let's build. Cool, good path. Let's start hiring engineers. So you will never get a lot. You will never have enough, but you will get headcount. So how do you build your team? It's super important, right? Understanding the model, like, are you going to bed your engineers? Are they going to be automation engineers, right? How do I find someone that can do all these skills, right? These are just books and books on this. But my point is, you want to be thoughtful, because once you hire, that's it, right? Like, building your team is a huge outcome on if you're successful or not. And that brings me to the last point, people manager to scale. As soon as you build your team, you are now a people manager. Hard stop. Everything else I've talked about here is basically an IC role. But when you become a people manager, your job is to grow the people under you. And if you forget this, you will fail, because at some point you need to delegate out to other people. And if you do not grow your people under you and delegate correctly, you will get crushed, right? And I think that's one thing that I see from my peers that fail, is they're off being a hero and they forget where, like, you're never going to scale correctly. You just can't, because you cannot hero ball it yourself. So a few things about people manager scale. And this one I want to hit on, because this is what I see, my peers do poorly, is they forget, right? You need to empower people to execute in their role, right? You need to make sure that they understand their job, that all of these things I'm talking about, your direct should be doing too, right? You need to delegate. As your programs grow, don't be afraid to delegate responsibilities to your engineers as you spend more time trying to scale your program, right? You won't be successful if you keep trying to do everything, and eventually you'll hit your breaking point. What got you here will not get you there. When you build a program, it's going to grow. So you want to make sure you can grow with it. All right, so now you know the roles, right? How do you navigate the start? So here are some tips that helped me build from scratch. And it's interesting because I write this down every time I have to restart. I actually sit and read these to remind myself, these are the things that I got to focus on. One, North Star, right? Establish a mission statement, which will guide you on which projects you should engage on. Remember, build your own milestones. A lot of times, when you join this company, there's no direction, because they hired you to build that direction. So you need to make sure that you don't get lost, right? So very quickly understand the problem, build your milestones, and make sure that you're hitting them. Because no one's going to be like, are you on time, right? None of my bosses have ever said, are you on time? They're expecting me to tell them where we are and if we're on time. So if you don't have that North Star, you're in trouble. Number two, judge value. Does current initiatives make sense at this point in time? If not, why are you doing them, right? The problem is engineering organizations can easily find itself going the wrong path. And it's your job to say, hey, this doesn't make sense. I looked at the data. It's not happy. It's not good. It's bad. Your hypothesis is wrong. Engineers, God bless them, they love the happy, shiny things. And the happy, shiny things don't always work. And it's your job to be like, it doesn't work, right? You have to be the adult. Ask uncomfortable questions. Just because things have always been a certain way, it doesn't mean it has to be the only way, right? What is the solution that you are bringing to the table? My favorite one is, directors that have been there from day one, when there were only 5 people. Now they're like 120. Oh, this is the way it's always been. Our engineers will never do that. That's bunk, right? If it's not right, why are you doing it? Have the data ready, be able to show that the new way, there's a new way out, and this is how you're going to execute it. Number 3, quick wins. Small, quick wins will create a lot of value and help build momentum for bigger wins later, right? I cannot stress this enough. Focus on low-hanging fruit in the beginning, right? Moonshot projects are more interesting, but until you're really understanding the story and journey of what is going on and why things are a certain way, right? What are you really launching towards? So when you join, work on, small stuff, right? Human improvement get capital, right? And what you'll find is as you execute small wins and get things better, you're going to get more trust, and more trust will kind of compound to bigger ticket items that you get to do and get more wins that way. And lastly, don't go alone, right? When you join, you need to find your champions that will be your stakeholders in quality. They will help you kind of steer this program. So I like to look at it as 2. There's the engineering champion, right? So this could be an architect, a staff engineer, maybe a staff front engineer, maybe a manager, right? And you need to pair with them to kind of drive this vision, right? And that will help be more frictionless. Because when one example is when I came in to Iterable, every team had their own Jira. So a bug in one could be a task in the other. And there's no way to determine quality, right? So working with a staff front engineer who was on both teams, I was like, is this good? And he was like, Jesus Christ, no, save us. So we worked together to standardize it. And this is just such a simple thing. But that gave us, his voice, and me working to standardize it gave us the momentum to get other engineers to be like, okay, fine, this is what the staff engineer says, so let's do it that way, right? Don't go alone. The other one is find quality champions to partner with outside of engineering, right? How does what you're going to do going to help them, right? Is it the director of customer service, right? Is it a solution architect, right? Obviously, what you do is going to help them. And if they are partnering with you, right, they will buy into the work that you're doing, and they will tell your boss, they will tell your hey, I want this guy to do this. I'm partnering with them. This is an initiative that's outside of engineering. It's business related, right? And that's going to build confidence in your brand new organization. So, let's see. Wow, I went through that fast. That's it. I appreciate. Thank you. Also, if you have any questions that, like often conferences, we go through this stuff fast and you're like, damn, I should have asked that. Feel free to email me, Jeff Singh at Iterable, or my LinkedIn is just Jeff Singh. Love to chat, talk about this, my experiences or anything. With that, do we want to open for questions? Which one? Someone asked, Christian asked, would love to talk someday on transitioning between IC and people manager and QA. That manager part is so important. So yeah, what is the path to transition? Well, first off, before I ask this, how many people here are in management or leads in this room? Quite a few. Okay, that makes sense. This is that manager track. So I think it very much depends on your company, but I think the last Vernon brought up really well. Like, do you have the want to transition, right? Like, you have to want to go to management, because once you've gone on the path, you will start taking the responsibilities necessary to get there. Now, I think you will do better if you're able to highlight the business priorities with the work you're doing to measure the impact of your team and kind of drive that. That kind of gives you the leadership position. But to be a people manager is a completely different proposition. It's do you have the want to help others, right? People management, in my mind, is is what can I do to create the right processes or environment so that my team can be successful? Whereas an IC is like, how do I drive the right outcomes? And that mentality shift is something that you need to be okay with and want to do, and then start executing on that. Yes.
Yes, sir. Often, quality, average quality, and one issue I think that you is that if a piece of software should go impact people's safety or needs to be regulatory compliance, to rely on advocacy a little bit to be direct. So I'm just wondering what are your comments when it comes to organizations whose job number one may be safety, mission criticality, and regulatory compliance?
I think the main thing, if there is anything to take from my talk, isn't that there is a way, is that to be successful in building a quality program, it means that you need to be adaptable to drive to the right way. So what I mean here is, if I have a company that is a SaaS company, like photo sharing company, right? Like, what is the most important thing? That my customers are happy, they can get their pictures, to probably security wise. On the other hand, if I'm like, hey, if I mess this up, someone will die, then you best bet that everything you do is around that. That's mission critical, right? So I think what I'm trying to say here is the frameworks for quality has been around for a while. What I want to see more of, and what I think the modern way is being able to create a bespoke system that understands the business priorities of your company and how to build the right quality program around it, how to build the right technical program around it, how to understand the KPIs and metrics that measure what you're looking at, right? Because mission critical versus non-mission critical, one's measuring velocity, one's measuring number of tests passed to make sure we're past audit, right? And then kind of how do you lead that and grow that? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah, I think so, right? I mean, a great example is, I was at a company, and one of the staff engineers built a framework on Selenium and Python, but the people writing the end-to-end test are their front engineers, right? So one of the things that I was brought up to director of engineering is like the amount of time it takes for front engineers to stop what they're doing, build test in Python makes no sense. The ROI is sunk cost, right? So why not adopt a framework that they can use? Cypress is an example because it's in JavaScript, right? So having that ability to come up as a leader and say, hey, just because we did something this way and we already sunk X amount of money into it, is that the right move, right? So yeah, I do think it is your job as a leader to be able to ask those uncomfortable questions, to give the solutions, to work with your engineers to find the right way, and then advocate for it. Any other questions? Sorry, go ahead. Sorry. Lower quality. Okay, sorry. The question was, have you ever had leadership ask for lower quality? They have never directly asked for lower quality. They've asked for velocity. They've asked for shorter turnaround time, but they never outright said lower quality, right? But it means lower quality, right? I think the part of advocacy and part of understanding what that, sorry. Oh, okay. Or is it coming through the mic or no? Okay. Well, I mean, you have to do your homework, right? Like I've had the head of product come to me and says, the velocity is too slow. We can't release. Your processes is slowing us down, right? So, being able to do your homework and say, okay, well, let me show you what our velocity looks like, what our pipeline looks like. Here's the schedule, right? Here's where the risk is involved based off historical data. I can tell you that. I can pull it up. What % risk are you okay with? Let's sign off on it, right? Giving that information to your leaders, right, and letting them sign off on it means that when they do take that trade-off, right, and it goes bad, it's not like, oh, our quality is bad. It's across the board, we made that trade-off because we have to make this, customer, if we don't get it, they're gonna churn. So we have to do it, so we understand. It is also your job to give as many points of like where I could potentially save us, right? So in your velocity questions or less quality is fine. We don't have to run these tests because it's gonna slow us down. But how do I de-risk us? Is it a beta? Is it a limited rollout? Do I put as many feature flags as I can? How do I ensure that if something does go bad, we have a SRE team ready to roll back, right? Maybe we spin up a separate instance just for them, for that customer. How do I make sure we don't blow up the rest of our orgs, right? That strategy given to the right leadership, let them make that decision based off the right data, means that you're not just bumbling around because you're trying to rush to something. You're thoughtfully doing it. You have a question?
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. 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 So the question was, what is the transition? What is like strategy? Or like, how do we go from a small startup or, maybe quality was not a factor because, reasons, and now they're scaled and, like, how do we build that quality program? Is that correct? Yep. Yep. That's a great question. So I think going back to the four things that we need, right? The true thing is, if I had to give you a word to take away from this, is bespoke. I know I didn't write it anywhere. I'm kicking myself. I think I wrote it in the paper, but bespoke. Your job is to build a bespoke program for the company that you work for, based off the business outcomes that your company needs to be successful. Bespoke. And why I say that is, these startups, like, they start off in someone's basement, someone's dorm, someone's house, like 6 guys, friends, gals, whatever, and then they scale, and grow. That means that some things, you may have someone that's like, wow, they're really good, they don't make mistakes, right? You could have someone that's just like shoddy code, because they hired someone from a different country and it's just unsustainable. The way that you need to approach it is to understand there's 2 ways to approach things when you see this, right? Is it the program is bad, like there's no guardrails, there's no process, and that's why you're doing stupid things? Or is it the tech side? You don't have the right testing, you don't have tools, right? And when you build, you need to determine which of these 2 you need to use and how much of each. Now, how do you determine that? That comes back to copy operations. What are the KPIs and metrics you can baseline and understand where the highest cost is to fix, right? Is it we're building the wrong thing and that's why it's mistaken. The code works beautifully, but it just, no one's using it because it's poor, because the experience is bad. That becomes a process thing that you need to implement. On the other hand, if it's like, you look at the root cause of these bugs and they're like, Jesus Christ, if we just tested this correctly, we could have caught 99% of these. That tells me it's an automation thing. So to answer your question, really, it's, do you understand what's going on in your system? Do you have visibility? Did you build that visibility? And then based off that, what solution do you need? Is it more of a process initiative or is it more of a technical solution? How do we bring those 2 in? Sam. Mm-hmm.
What are those
So the question was, what are some soft skills necessary to kind of, engage with, develop like engineering, right? To champion quality, right? That's a great question. I think, oh my God, what is that word? You kind of put yourself in the developer's shoes, right? Like what I tell my engineers is your job is quality, but that's how to get there is you need to make sure your engineers are effective and efficient. If your engineers are effective and efficient, quality will come. So the work you're doing really is to help them be successful. And if they're successful, the product should be successful. So when you have that mindset, it's not there's a wall, toss it over. God, why did you do this? God damn it, right? It's, hey, how can I help you do your job better, developers, right? How can I give you the right numbers? How can I give you the right tooling so that it works? You don't have to sit there and go, God, my test is flaky. Skip. Oops, there goes the incident, right? How do you put the process in? Oh, this is so simple. I understand. I can click one button, see all the bugs I have, or I can see all the root causes. What can you do to help make them better, right? It's like, how can I get you promoted? Because if you write less flaky code and we make money, you're going to get promoted. You're going to get more shares. And that mentality of like, how do I help you? I'm doing this to make you more successful is one of the ways I see the most buy-in, because it's like, I want you to help me, so I want you to win. Any other questions, or am I out of time? Okay. Good. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.